Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this first talk session of the EventWell Digital Summit 2020. We'll just wait for Emily to come and join us on our digital stage. She'll be with us in a second. If you want to do some tweeting today, hashtag is EW Summit 20. So if you want to tweet out some of the things that you're going to be learning with Emily today. Here she is. Hi, Emily.
Hang on. Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Excellent. So just some little housekeeping items. So if you're having any issues, put that into chat for me and I'll see if I can support and help you out. If you've got any questions for Emily that come up through the session, then please use the Q&A function there. You can see just to the right hand side. Pop your question in there. If somebody else likes your question, they'll click on it and then push it up to the top of the pile. We'll aim to do questions around about 5 past 11, and then we'll be wrapping up the session at 11:15. So to quickly introduce Emily, we know each other very well, don't we, Emily?
Yes.
We're family.
Yeah.
And we are family. Emily is a registered nutritionist, and along with her business partner Lisa Patient, she offers corporate wellbeing services through her company Vital Health Nutrition. There isn't really much that Emily doesn't know about good, healthy nutrition, and she's a good cook as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to pass on that compliment. So Emily's going to be talking about eating for great mental health. So she's going to be showing some key nutrients for brain health, explain how what you eat and when you eat can have a significant impact on how you feel, how you cope and how you can thrive. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Emily.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, so as Helen said, we give corporate seminars, which are all now webinars, obviously. And this is one of our most popular topics. So it's eating for great mental health. Let me just find my slides. And now, of course, they've just appeared. I don't know what's happening here. I practiced this a moment ago and it worked perfectly. And of course, it's not doing it now. Right, I'm hoping that you can see this. So yes, today's subject is all about eating for great mental health. So let's start off by understanding what mental wellness is. And the World Health Organization's definition is it's that wellness, mental wellness, is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And obviously, in order to do all those things, you need really good brain function. And there's lots of factors that affect our mental wellness. I'm not going to cover all of them today because they don't really fit into nutrition and lifestyle. But the things I am going to talk about today are the elements in green. So obviously, as a nutritionist, I'm going to be talking about nutrition, everything you should be eating for great brain health. I'm going to touch on gut health as well, because it's been discovered there's a great link between your gut health and your mood. I'm obviously going to talk about stress, and I'm going to touch a little bit on sleep, but I know that over the course of the next 2 days, there's lots of webinars that you can watch on sleep, so there won't be much about that. So stress, how we can support ourselves under stress, we're going to cover that first. Then I'm going to go into nutrition to support brain and adrenal function. So your adrenal glands are are where we produce stress hormones. So we need to be really careful that we're looking after them well. And then we're going to talk about the link between the gut and mental health. So I'm sure you all know what stress is, and I'm sure most people have experienced this to a greater degree since the middle of March, but it's a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. And stresses can be external or internal. So external will be obviously the work demands, psychological things, social situations that you might find challenging, but they can also be internal. So if we're ill, particularly if we have an infection, the body will experience that as stress. And the same from if you had a medical procedure, that the trauma that would be created by that could be experienced as stress by the body. But it's really important to state that it's not an illness, it's a state. But the issue is when it becomes too excessive and prolonged, you can develop mental and physical illnesses as a result of stress. And it's really important to check in with yourself and just work out where you are on the stress curve. So up to the middle of this chart, so the bright orange, or sorry, bright yellow section is where we want to be. That's the optimum state to be in. So there's enough stress in your life to keep you motivated. We don't want too little because that can render us completely inactive, but you want a really balanced amount of stress in your life so that you're as productive as possible. It's when it starts to tip over from fatigue into exhaustion that we need to start being aware of the impact that stress is having on our lives. And then, as you can see, that can really quite rapidly for some people deteriorate into anxiety, panic attacks, kind of irrational anger, and then ultimately it can lead to breakdown and burnout. So really important just to check in and establish where you are. And if you can do that, work out what your stresses are and work on trying to reduce them. And the things I'm going to talk about today will really help with this, to get you back from that exhaustion phase back into the optimum phase. So these are the signs that you're stressed. Again, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you these, but difficulty switching off. I meet so many people who just find it impossible to relax. Insomnia, so after a while, the kind of imbalance in your hormones can prevent sleep. Feeling irritable, getting impatient, headaches, tension, particularly around the neck, digestive problems. So I'm going to go into this a bit more, but stress has a massive impact on the digestive system. Weight gain, and this is particularly around the middle, and this is one of the actions of cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones. And then a lack of interest in sex. And this is because all of your hormones are being diverted, all the hormone building blocks are being diverted into making stress hormones at the expense of sex hormones. So there's often a big link between infertility and prolonged stress. So what actually happens to your body when you're stressed? So as I'm sure you all know, it's a very primitive response. So it's really to protect us in the event of imminent danger. So your body is still having the same reaction as it would have done if we were cave people. And then it was all about protecting us. It was about survival. But the things that happen to our body still happen, even though the stresses that most of us are experiencing are nothing like life-threatening, but still our body reacts in the same way. So it's called the fight or flight response. And all these things are happening in your body. But the issue is, if these are happening daily for months and weeks and maybe years on end, they're going to have a negative effect on your health. So some of the things are quite interesting as to why they're happening. So your pupils dilate, and this is so you can see better to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. A lot of it's about what's happening in the body, about physical processes to get energy to your muscles so that you can run away. So that involves removing the blood supply from things that are not vital for survival, like digestion. So as I said, Digestion is really affected by stress. So all the blood supply is taken from the digestive system and put into the muscles. And that means that peristalsis will slow down. And that's the kind of muscular movement that's keeping digestion going. So that will be why for some people, stress results in digestive problems like IBS or constipation or diarrhea. And then our blood pressure increases because it needs to pump the blood around the body even harder to get to the muscles more quickly. And then I'm sure you can imagine kind of long-term high blood pressure will start to have an effect on the cardiovascular system. And one of the other things that stress does, or the stress hormones do, is it tells the body to break down any stores of glucose, and it releases them into the energy for immediate energy to get you moving away from this attacker. But the problem with that is that your blood sugar levels will be high, and that could lead to long-term complications. So these are some of the impacts of elevated cortisol over a long period of time. So increased fat storage. So the cortisol is telling your body to store fat. It's increasing your blood pressure. It's breaking down muscle mass. It demineralizes bones. It suppresses the immune system. It can lead to memory loss and depression. And all of these things can, over time, lead to illness. So we really don't want to be living a life where we're kind of surviving on cortisol and forcing the body to make it all the time. And stress can affect your eating in different ways. Some people find that when they're anxious, they can't eat. And other people find that they end up binging. And you'll understand why people binge when we get into the presentation a bit more. But it can drive cravings for stimulants. So these are things that are going to give you a short, sharp boost to help you carry on. And obviously, most of them are fairly problematic in terms of being in your diet for a long, kind of on a regular basis. And then once you start consuming or over-consuming stimulants, you start feeling rubbish as well. So you're using them in the first place to give you that lift. But anyone who's drunk more than 3 or 4 coffees in a day will know that it doesn't make you feel good. You start to feel irritable and jumpy, really edgy, and it's going to drive you to want more of the same. So that's kind of, those symptoms are really very similar to feeling stressed in the first place. So it's not really even a short-term solution. So what can we do to reduce the impact of stress on our bodies? And the key thing, and this is what I hope you leave today or this talk with, is this understanding of blood sugar balance. So when we consume food, if it's really high in refined carbohydrates and sugar, it causes a really big spike in blood sugar balance. And then your pancreas responds to that by producing insulin. But if you've had a sharp influx of refined sugars, the pancreas overcompensates and produces loads of insulin, and your blood sugars come crashing down. And then you're at the bottom of that loop. And this is where we get cravings. It's also where our blood sugars are low, we're irritable, stress feels much more unmanageable than it might normally do. And it's in these dips that will reach for the next stimulant. So say you had your breakfast of white toast and jam and cornflakes, and that caused the first spike. The first dip will be mid-morning, where you might reach for a cup of coffee and maybe someone's left donuts lying around. Hopefully, if you're in your own home now, there won't be donuts lying around, but the equivalent that you can find in the cupboard. Your blood sugars will spike again because of the caffeine and the sugar, and then you'll crash again. And you might have great intentions to have a good lunch, but you're ravenous, so you end up having a huge bowl of pasta or a sandwich or a baguette. Your blood sugars spike, you crash again. Mid-afternoon, you can't keep your eyes open, so you're piling on the coffee and more sugar, which is creating another spike. So over the long term, this is really damaging because you've got high blood sugar levels, and this could lead to type 2 diabetes as well as cardiovascular disease. And then all that extra sugar, if you're not using it by burning it off as energy, is being stored as fat. So this is where the weight gain comes in. So what we want to do is choose foods that release their energy slowly and gently, so we never create this spike that leads to a crash. So really gentle release of energy over the day. And then your energy levels are much better. Your stress levels are much more manageable, and you should have less cravings. And over the long term, you're benefiting your health. So these are symptoms of poor blood sugar control, and I'm sure you can relate to them. So, I mean, for me particularly, it would be things like really feeling that sugar had control over you, or caffeine, you know, needing to get through the day with these things, or having afternoon slumps when you really just can't keep your eyes open. For some people, it gets quite physical. So I know in my case, I will start to get a bit shaky, my vision will blur. And then you just won't have consistent energy levels. You know, you'll be going from feeling great to crashing, to feeling great to crashing. But really what we want is this kind of even level of energy. So these are the 6, we call them our 6 golden rules. These are the 6 golden rules for controlling your blood sugar levels. So timing is really important. If you think about keeping your blood sugars balanced, then if you left 4, 5, 6 hours without eating, of course your blood sugars are going to be crashing. And then the only thing that you'll want to eat is something high in sugar or something that contains a lot of caffeine. So it's really important to keep the gaps between meals to at the maximum 4 hours. And you might find, especially if you're running an event, that you've got a really big gap between lunch and dinner. So I think it's really important to have a snack and to recognize that without that, you're not going to be in control of your next food choices, and your stress levels are going to be higher. Point number 2 is have protein with every meal. This makes such a difference to how your energy levels are. So I would really encourage you to think about that, and make sure that every meal, and in fact every snack as well, contains some protein. You should be eating complex carbohydrates and whole foods. So complex carbohydrates mean that they still contain a lot of the fiber that they should have naturally. So it would be the difference between a sliced white bread and a wholemeal bread, or white pasta versus wholemeal pasta, or white rice versus brown rice. And whole foods are just simply foods in their natural state. So it could be things like oats, lentils, beans, vegetables, fruit. So the more we have of those, like the complex carbohydrates and the whole foods, the higher the fiber content of our diets. Therefore, the slower the release of energy. The body finds it hard to digest protein and fiber. So if you eat those at every meal, the energy release is much slower. Cutting down on refined and sugary foods is very important obviously for the point above, because they don't contain much fiber, but also sugar causes those spikes that we saw on the graph. And then caffeine as well. Caffeine causes a stress reaction in the body. So it causes that spike in stress hormones, which is always followed by a crash. And then eat more essential fats. But I'm going to talk a lot more about essential fats when we get onto brain nutrients. So just to go over some of those things. So these are great sources of protein. So meat, fish, eggs, dairy, nuts, seeds, beans and pulses, and soya products are all really good sources of protein. So every time you eat, you should have one of those things in your meal, at least. Eating whole foods, as I said, it's foods in their natural state, and really trying to make that switch from white refined foods to more whole unprocessed foods. And the other thing to say about sugar and the brain is the brain relies on a steady supply of glucose to function well. So if we balance our blood sugars, we're doing that. We're giving it a steady supply of glucose. But glucose, which is what sugar's broken down into, will cause massive, if you just ate kind of pure sugar, it would cause a massive spike and crash, and then your brain will not function well on that. So it's about thinking you're doing the best for your brain as well as for your energy levels by balancing your blood sugar levels. And then I mentioned about coffee, so it creates this stress reaction. But one thing it's really important to remember is it is addictive. So don't go cold turkey with coffee, because you'll have terrible withdrawal symptoms. just do it really, really slowly. So if you're having 4 or 5 cups of tea a day, I would take 2 weeks to get down to always just having 4, another 2 weeks to get down to having just 3. And experiment with herbal teas or naturally decaffeinated tea and coffee, and drink more water. That's always great for the brain and for energy levels. So yeah, that part about blood sugar balance is so important. So I think, you know, really kind of work out how you're doing with that. And now I'm going to go on to talk about specific nutrients for the brain. So the brain is 60% fat. It's a really fatty organ. And if you don't have enough fats in your diet, you're depriving your brain of the building blocks it needs to function well. And there's a very big correlation between having a low-fat diet and all kinds of mental health issues like depression, attention deficit disorder, poor memory, dementia. And the brain is really uses up a lot of our energy. So if we're deficient in energy, then that's going to affect your brain function. And if you're deficient in fats, that's going to affect your brain function. And I just wanted to show you just a little bit about the brain. So the brain is made up of millions of neurons. And this myelin sheath, this kind of white tail bit, really relies on a good supply of fats. And this is where your brain is transmitting messages. So we need this to be really rich in fat. And the type of fats that are particularly important for the brain are omega-3 fats. And hopefully you've heard people talk about omega-3. Omega-3 is such an essential part of your diet for many, many reasons and for many areas of health. But in terms of brain health, they regulate neurotransmitters, so they keep them in balance. So there's lots of different types of neurotransmitters, and we want them to be functioning well and to be in balance with each other. They relax the blood vessels in the brain, and obviously the blood vessels are supplying the brain with energy. They boost immunity, they decrease inflammation and pain. And a lot of mental health conditions are now being linked to inflammation and inflammation of the brain. So the higher our diets are in omega-3, the more we're doing to kind of prevent that happening. So the best sources of omega-3 are oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring and trout, flaxseed, pumpkin seed and walnut seed, when walnuts have good levels of omega-3. And actually we should have put chia seed on there as well. So it's quite a small family of foods that are high in omega-3, but it's really important to have them in your diet. I would say have nuts and seeds every day and try and have oily fish at least 3 times a week. The other important family of essential fats for your brain are the omega-6 fats. So these are really important for that myelin sheath. So they're kind of the tail of the neuron that's transmitting signals. Low levels are linked with schizophrenia. They're known to improve memory. They're great for hormone balance, so really good for PMT or PMS. And they're found in sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, evening primrose, meat and dairy products. And it's really important as well to stress that you should have a really good balance between 3 and 6. So most people have enough 6 in their diets because they're found in abundance in vegetables. It's omega-3 that most people need to concentrate on in terms of upping their intake. But if you were to be eating seeds every day, then you'd be sure to have a good supply of omega-6. The other type of fats that are kind of often overlooked are phospholipids. And these help the brain make neurotransmitters, and they protect us against memory decline and enhance mood. So eggs are a fantastic source of phospholipids. We're really big fans of eggs. Sardines, liver, soya beans, peanuts and nuts are also good sources. And there are some fats that you should be trying to avoid. So particularly damaged fats. They're often found in processed foods and cakes, ready meals, but really try and cut down on these. And neurotransmitters, I just wanted to quickly touch on these, but I'm sure you're aware of some of them. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter that we associate with pleasure and reward. It And this is where sugar becomes really problematic, because sugar creates a kind of dopamine spike, and then you can become quite addicted to that. But instead of having sugar, it would be really great to eat foods that are high in tyrosine, and then you're naturally giving your body the building blocks to make more dopamine. So things like chicken, turkey, fruit, like apricots, cranberries and kiwis, soya, cheese and eggs. And the other neurotransmitter, which I'm sure you're aware of, is serotonin, which is the happy hormone. It's really important for mood, for dreams, and for kind of flow of thoughts. And to boost your levels of this, you need to eat foods that are high in tryptophan. So tofu and miso are good sources. Eggs, seaweed, seafood, oats, bananas, turkey, nuts, seeds. And it's important to combine high tryptophan foods with carbohydrate in order to get through to the brain. And yes, a warning, depleted by alcohol. This is why we feel rubbish the day after drinking. So the other thing that obviously it's not a food, but vitamin D, which we make through being in the sunshine, has a really big impact on mood. So studies have shown that people with low vitamin D levels are more likely to suffer with depression. So again, very difficult to get from your diet. I mean, my advice is to get out in the sun. And if you can't do that, I would be taking a supplement, but really good to get your levels tested. And then the other important group of foods for your brain are brightly coloured fruit and vegetables. So the polyphenols and the antioxidants in these brightly coloured fruit and vegetables have an amazing impact on the brain, and they're so important. So eating a rainbow of fruit and vegetables every day will ensure that you're giving your brain the right nutrients. And then I mentioned about the adrenal glands. So these are the glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they are where we produce cortisol and adrenaline. So we need to keep them really strong and healthy. So B vitamins are really important for the adrenals. Vitamin C is kind of a really misunderstood vitamin. It's really important for health, but found again in brightly coloured fruit and veg. Zinc, magnesium and chromium are important. And then green tea has a really relaxing effect because it contains theanine. So if you're thinking of cutting down on coffee, maybe think about starting to drink green tea. I'm very conscious of the time, but I'm going to quickly run through the gut. So it's been known forever that the gut is really important for health. And it's maybe not until quite recently realised it's been found out that it's got a massive impact on brain function. So our gut is full of trillions of bacteria, and we want to maintain a really good balance between, there will always be a few kind of bad bacteria, but we really want to make sure we've got a massive amount of good bacteria in your gut because of all the functions that we're going to find out about now. So that it's now been discovered that our gut bacteria, or what is now called the microbiome, can communicate with the brain. So if you have a better gut flora, it can have massive improvements on memory, depression and anxiety. And they now know that gut bacteria producing brain chemicals like GABA. So GABA is a really relaxing neurotransmitter, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is something that is really important for things like preventing Alzheimer's. So it's these bacteria in our gut that are producing these things, which is quite incredible to think of. So we really need to be looking after our gut if we want good brain health. And how do we do that? So the way to get great gut flora diversity is to eat as many foods as you can. So diversity is so key for feeding those bacteria. They really thrive on good levels of fibre, so particularly fruit and vegetables. So what can we do to improve our gut health? So keep well hydrated. The function of the gut really relies on a lot of water, so it's important to be drinking 1.5 to 2 litres of water a day. Eat plenty of vegetables for fibre, and in particular prebiotics. So these are food for probiotics, the bacteria. So onions, garlic, leeks, bananas, apples, asparagus, cold potatoes are really good sources of the food that the bacteria thrive on. Have more fermented foods. I'm going to talk a bit more about that on the next slide. And consider taking a supplement, a probiotic supplement, if you do have digestive problems. So here's a nice list of some fermented foods. So if you're not having any of these, I think I would probably start with kefir, which is fermented yogurt, or fermented tea, which is kombucha. Sauerkraut's delicious. Sourdough bread might be quite accessible. But really think about, am I eating these types of foods, and what would I start with? So, quickly got to the end. Stress can be inevitable, but it's really about controlling it so we don't tip into the kind of disruptive, damaging levels of stress. But what we eat and how we eat can really have an impact on how we experience stress. And what we eat can have a big impact on our brain function. So these are the things I think you could consider changing from today. So include more good fats in your diet, oily fish, nuts, seeds, avocados and eggs. Choose unrefined carbohydrates and lower the amount of sugar in your diet. Think about how much caffeine you're consuming. And then one of the key things for kind of keeping that blood sugar stable is to make sure you have protein every time you eat, and think about adding fermented foods into your diet. So, there he is. That's the end. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
Here we go. Brilliant. As usual, Emily.
Fantastic.
It's a good point. Actually, do you remember that Emily told me off on the caffeine point about giving up caffeine? She's right, because I gave up caffeine 7 years ago and I just stopped. And then I told Emily what I'd done, and I kind of, in Emily's very, very nice, friendly way, kind of told me off. Because I always remember that for 2 weeks, literally, I'd total come down. I stopped drinking alcohol at the same time. No effect on that whatsoever. But the caffeine was that come down can be horrendous, and it was.
Yes,
yeah.
And if you do it slowly, you don't have to go through that. Yeah. But that's great to know in hindsight.
So I should have gone slowly. I used to probably drink, typical events person, I probably used to drink about 6 minimum cups of coffee a day. So I was drinking a lot of coffee. Although some people would say it wasn't proper coffee because there were lattes. So
okay,
yeah, but it wasn't like that. I wasn't drinking espressos or anything like that. But it's the same amount of caffeine. It's in a latte as it is in an espresso, because it's the same amount of coffee. Yeah. So brilliant session. What we're just going to have, because we're slotting this into all of our little sessions that we're doing today, we're just going to do just a little nice neck stretch. So we're going to be doing some breathing exercises and neck stretches through the day. So I want everyone just to take a moment. We're going to do the full neck stretch. So we're going to put our head forward, then we're going to move to that side. I don't know what side that is on yours, and I'm not sure.
Right.
I think that's right side, but it's my left shoulder.
It's our right.
Yeah. And then we'll move the head back, and then we'll move it to the right hand side. And all it does, it just stretches out the muscles in the top of your shoulders and in your neck. Because when you sit down, if you're at an office all day, this is where you tend to hold an awful lot of your tension. So we're just going to start. So we're just going to put that head forward and move it forward. Feel a slight stretch in the back of your neck. And then you're going to move your head forward, even down. So almost like your head's, try and get it to 45 degrees. So you can really feel that stretch in the back of the neck. You then move your head up, and then move it to that side. So you're moving your ear near to your shoulder. As soon as you can start to feel that slight stretch here in the neck and through that shoulder muscle, you should be able to feel it all the way along. Move your shoulder down and move your head further. So you can really feel quite a tight stretch there. And just hold that for a couple of seconds. Now you're going to lift your head up, move it to the back. My headband's going to fall off doing this. Move it to the back. And again, so that you can feel that stretch in your muscles at the front of your neck here where your esophagus is. Okay, and your windpipe. Move your head back even further. Just hold that stretch. It's really hard to do this and talk. Lift your head up, and then last stretch. over to that other side, that my right hand side. Okay, so move your head there. Feel that stretch along your neck into your shoulder. Drop your shoulder down more and push your ear. You're trying to push your ear to your shoulder, but hold your other shoulder down so you feel that stretch right through your neck and your shoulder. Okay, and then just hold that a little second and then release that. So what you should be able to feel that release of tension in the shoulder and the neck. And we recommend that you do that a few times a day. So remember, do a morning stretch, and just twice a day is sometimes that's enough. Just set a reminder in your phone that you just do a morning stretch, and in the afternoon just do an afternoon stretch, particularly if you're sat at your computer all day. When you start to get straight, just releases some of this tension in your shoulders. Okay, right, questions. Oh, look. So we've got about 10 minutes of questions. We're going to start with Ivan's question. So we're told to not eat too many eggs a week. Is this true? And if so, what is best practice when eating eggs?
So, yeah, there's a lot of myth around eggs. It depends how old you are. I'm old enough to remember when we were told not to eat eggs. And I think the rationale behind that was that they were high in cholesterol. They're not. And they are a fantastic superfood. So I would say there's nothing wrong with eating 6 to 10 eggs a week. You can have an egg a day. The only thing I would say is if you're prone to constipation, maybe don't have too many eggs because they can be binding. But they're a fantastic source of good fats, nutrients. Always eat the whole egg. I've had, obviously, there's this, again, a slimming myth that you shouldn't eat yolk, but rubbish. They're so good for you. So don't be worried about eggs. They're about as convenient a food as you can find.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. It's a great question, Ivan. Thanks for asking that. There's a lot to be said for the old campaigns and government messages that used to come out in the 80s. We weren't supposed to eat eggs. We weren't supposed to eat pork. Butter. We weren't supposed to eat any of that. And it's butter actually is, believe it or not, healthy for you, Emily.
It's so good for you. And the problem is I think it was the 60s and 70s, they decided that saturated fat caused heart disease. So everybody switched to margarine, and then the rates of cardiovascular disease have just rocketed since then, because margarine is made with hydrogenated fats, which is so damaging for health, for brain health, for cardiovascular health, for everything. It really is quite a poisonous food item. So I always tell people you should be eating butter, and ideally, if you can afford it, organic butter. It's good for you. It's a natural food, whereas margarine is made in a factory and it's plasticized. It really is quite harmful to health. So
yeah, and there's a lot to be said for good fats.
Yeah,
because they're now a lot of the NHS promote is to turn a full fat butter, like full fat organic butter, full fat milk as well, for as long as you can drink it, because it's really great for keeping away osteoporosis, which they think there's been an increase in that due to people drinking semi-skimmed and skimmed milk too soon. Children, if anybody with children, they should never be drinking green or red top milk, blue milk all the way. And also adults as well. My mum's an NHS nurse. She's an oncology nurse, cancer nurse, and she actually says that you should be drinking full fat milk to the age of 30 if possible, and then possibly look at going to a green top, but she said never skim, never a red top, because all the goodness has been taken out of there. You're just drinking white water. No, isn't it? Now another question from Ivan: what's the best type of meat to eat to stay healthy?
I guess it depends on your type, what you consider to be meat. If you consider fish to be meat, fish would be best. And then I would say chicken. Anything that, there's so much information out there about how different animals are fed. So grass-fed beef is very good for you. The issue is that too much red meat can be inflammatory. But if it's good quality grass-fed meat, it's very healthy. The other thing that's supposed to be really good for us is game. If you can if you can afford it or you like the taste of it. But again, because the animals are wild, they're feeding on seeds and nuts and foraging. Also, they're very lean because they're wild. They're not cooped up, so that meat's supposed to be very healthy. But I don't suppose we could eat that all the time. But yeah, so I would say chicken is probably the most affordable meat. And again, with things like, obviously there's the welfare of the animals to consider, but also if you buy organic meat, that they're fed a good diet. So they're using that food to build their protein, which is what we're eating. So it's important to think about the provenance of the food.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Emily. Great answer. Yasmin's putting that on vegan and eating a few walnuts a day going to help my omega intake, or should I add something else?
You can now get vegan omega-3 supplements. So they're made from the algae that fish feed on. So fish feed on this algae, and that's why they're a good source of omega-3. So I would say if you're a vegan and even vegetarian, I would be taking a vegan omega-3 supplement. I mean, I would say even meat eaters, most people would benefit from an omega-3 supplement. Obviously, they could have it from fish, but I think if I wasn't eating any animal products, I would definitely take an vegan omega-3 supplement.
Yeah, that's a great tip, Emily. Actually, I was going to say that if you can, just for general brain health, your omegas, make sure that you're taking a supplement, regardless of whether, like Emily said, meat eater, vegetarian, vegan, whatever your choice. It's just a very, really, really good, healthy choice and option to make. Ivan's put a comment in here. I stopped drinking black tea with milk and sugar 2 years ago and replaced with turmeric tea, and green tea. Fantastic.
So yeah, turmeric, however you say it, is really anti-inflammatory. So it's fantastic for brain health. It's in fact, I recommend it to clients with digestive problems because it can soothe the inflammation in the gut. It's amazing for joints. Fantastic. So yeah, that's brilliant. And then green tea, as I said, contains theanine, which gets us into this state of relaxation that you can achieve through meditation. It does have a bit of caffeine in there, so if you're someone that's caffeine sensitive, maybe don't have 10 cups a day. But the antioxidant properties of green tea are really beneficial for lots of different areas of health.
Excellent. And we've got a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to finish on the last question that I have. So to keep this to the events industry and specific to event professionals. So we know at EventWell that 80% of event professionals are struggling with their diet, but we also know that it's the 5th most stressful industry. So that cortisol effect and then that stress effect that Emily was talking about, when you're in an event day, I think there's most event guys can literally get through a whole event day and haven't eaten. And that's as well with the stress effect is suppressing suppressing your digestion, your appetite. So you feel hungry, basically, is what is happening. Is there any top tips you can kind of give to event professionals so they're making sure that they're getting that fuel into the body? Because it's really challenging.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because I'm on a panel tomorrow about talking about the 3 pillars of health. And I think it's about, you're all brilliant at planning. And maybe it's about just giving yourself some of that back, self-care and thinking, I'm planning this event. I've also got to plan my fuel for the day. And I would say, unless you're have a nut allergy, nuts are really convenient. I would pack pots of nuts in your bag. Make sure you start the day with a really good breakfast. So have plenty of protein. So ideally an egg-based breakfast, or if you don't eat eggs, then something with yogurt or nuts and seeds. And I think just try and plan your eating times in. So as I said, if you go beyond 4 hours, you hit a blood sugar low, and then everything will feel more difficult. You're more likely to over-respond to stress. You're going to feel tired. So it's really about, before you enter that arena, it's that you've also thought, this is my plan for the day, and worked out when you can sneak some food in. And I know that might sound unrealistic, but I think if you want to get the best out of your day, then you've got to think about your own fuel and how you're going to achieve that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's some great protein bars you can buy now that are quite healthy. Like Pulsin, I really like. Deliciously Ella has some protein balls, bounce balls. These are things you can have in your bag, and they're not high in sugar because they're mostly made from nuts and seeds and maybe dates or some dried fruit, but they're perfect for just keeping you going. If you really can't eat food, real food, I would have a stash of those as well.
Yeah.
And plenty of water.
Yes, plenty of water, absolutely. Some great tips there, Emily. I think you'd absolutely 100% back that up. You know, like Emily said, we're planners, so we just need to get better at planning our own self-care, because we're great at planning things for other people. You know, when you do your running order, make sure your breaks are factored in there so you can take yourself off, even if it's just for 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go and eat a yogurt or snack on some nuts or anything like that, like Emily said. And stay away from the pastries, people, as well. Stay away from the pastries.
And stop putting them out at events.
Yeah, another point. That's a whole other event, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yes. Right, so we'll do another future EventWell talks on that, and we'll bring up that topic.
Yeah.
Excellent. Emily, another fantastic session. Thank you so much for joining us today and for kicking off that was the first talk for the EventWell Summit. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll share Emily's details after the event, so you'll have all of those. So if you do have any further questions for Emily, you can contact her directly in terms of that. Big round of applause to Emily.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the technical hitches at the beginning. It worked perfectly beforehand.
It's a live event. This is still a live event, even though it's still a live event, people. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.